Thank you, Stan. And you're right. I would admit that we are friends. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a great evening and a little bit lengthy, and I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can. I want to commend Steve for an outstanding banquet here, second annual Blair County Hall of Fame, and already you're down to Ebersole? What are the qualifications next year? If you can maintain a heart rate, you might be able to get in, I guess, right? I have no idea why I was asked to even introduce John Ebersole. We weren't good friends in college, and I don't even really like the guy. I don't usually do a lot of banquets, and my wife, I was leaving tonight, and I said I'm coming to the Altoona to introduce John Ebersole, and she's a real student of sports. She said, who the hell is John Ebersole? He wanted Joe Paterno to do it, and Paterno never returned any of his calls. And I know they put this banquet together months and months. It takes a lot of hard work from a lot of different people and a lot of different committees. But Steve Sheets asked me yesterday if I would mind coming up here and doing this. He told me John's wife, Janet, was in tears. If I didn't do it, she would have to come up here and introduce him. I got you off the hook, Janice. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep this very brief. And I could talk a lot about John Ebersole, and I really got to know him in college. And for the life of me, in Blair County, I have no idea how he became commissioner here for so many years. If this man is not indicted soon, I'll tell you one thing, there is no justice in this world. On a serious note, coming up here this evening, thinking about what I was going to say about John Ebersole and introducing him, he went through a transition. When I first met him, I mean, he was the All-American, All-State defensive tackle, and in fact, I saw him in a spring game where he was a starting tackle and just absolutely, making great plays whenever with he and Mike Reed, and he got hurt, and he hurt his knee I think in the Navy game. I think a lot of it is documented in this propaganda in your program if you care to look at it. But he got hurt, and like I said, he was just a great football player throughout his high school and into his freshman, sophomore year in college, and got hurt his knee. And then Steve Smear kind of moved in and took over, and he took over the defensive tackle position. So John Ebersole came back that following year and started a defensive end for us. And we get a lot of credit, and Penn State has been known as linebacker U and all those kind of things, and there's a great accolades for myself and a lot of the linebackers that went there. But in that 68 and 69 season, which were undefeated seasons, and we won 2 Orange Bowls, one against Kansas and one against Missouri, we probably had the most devastating front four in college football. And I look back on the team, especially the defensive football team we had with John at right defensive end, Steve Smear, Mike Reed, and also Gary Hall. I mean, these 4 guys put so much pressure on the quarterback. I mean, the running game for the most part was non-existent. No one could run the football against us. And it was great for me playing linebacker and not having anybody touch me and being able to make tackles. And also for our defensive backs, Neil Smith ended up being, I think, led the country in interceptions one year with 10 or 11. But these guys really dominated the line of scrimmage for us, and really it was a pleasure. And I mean, it was really a great pleasure to play linebacker, behind that group of defensive linemen. And on a serious note, I thinking about what to say about John, and the thing that comes to mind is something I did read in this program tonight, what he talked about. I mean, he wasn't a guy who was a cheerleader in the huddle. I can remember when I first, as a sophomore, came in the huddle and looked across, and we had a great defensive team in that year. So I saw the likes of Smear and Reed and Ebersole, and just coming out of huddle, and Ebersole wouldn't say anything. He just crossed the huddle, would look at you with a menacing stare he had, and gave you the kind of attitude, you better be ready to play on this football team. We've got some great players here, and you better hold your own here as well. And I was amazed the way he was able to play any way you wanted to play the game. And he reminds me a little bit of a guy named Jack Lambert, who I played with for about 12 years in Pittsburgh. And John Ebersole was an aggressive football player on the field, and I'll tell you one thing. Against teams like Syracuse, who would really try to come at you and hammer the ball, sort of like maybe the Earl Strum offense, just try to run the ball right at you, he could play that type of game as well. He played a finesse team like he played Missouri in the Orange Bowl. He could do that as well because he was a great athlete. Like I said, he went from defensive tackle to defensive end, and finally in the pros played 8 years at linebacker, and I think played all 3 positions. So he could play the game any way you wanted to play it. Aggressive football player. I mean, he really took no prisoners out there. And I think the thing I remember most about him is the fact when we were freshmen at that time went up against the varsity kind of as a scout team, and the reputation John Ebersole had, if you had to come out there and you were putting on the Navy plays for Penn State defense that day, you better know where John Ebersole was on that field, because he's going to give you 110% every play, whether it's practice, game, or whatever. And I saw many a freshman get a rude awakening to college football from John Ebersole. Some of the most tremendous hits I've seen, not only in games, but in practice as well. And that's the way he played the game. You knew when he lined up to play, you better be ready to play. And I guess probably the best compliment I can give John Ebersole for myself is, I'm sure glad he was on my team. I'd like to introduce right now John Ebersole to the American Hall of Fame.